All right.
This afternoon we're interviewing Mr. William E. Bramswig. The interviewer is Michael Akey at Camp Smith, February 14th, 2001. Mr. Bramswig, give us a little background, where you grew up and what you were doing prior to the war.
I was born in New York City in Manhattan, Harlem, 130th Street. We lived in that whole neighborhood for about 30 years. And we were there when the war started. I had two brothers and two sisters, mother and father. They were all older than me. My two brothers, one went in and he wound up in Iran. He was in supplies, and they were supplying equipment to the Russians. My other brother, he went into the Navy and was on a troop ship going back and forth to Australia most of the time. And he always landed in the West Coast in San Francisco. And when he had to go home on leave, he used to fly home. He used to borrow money from everybody so he could fly home for a few days. Well, anyway, at that time, you were supposed to check with your draft board every 6 months to find out what your status is. And then different people in the neighborhood that had sons that were in service, when they met me, they would say, "Oh," they called me Willie. "Willie, when are you going to go, in the draft?" My son, one guy was flying a B-25 in Europe. He was home already. That's when it was 25 missions at the beginning. So anyway, I had a half a day off at work for Lincoln's birthday. So I went down to the draft board and I said, "I just want to check on my status." I said, "What's your name?" I said, "William Bramswig, So the girl goes over and she's checking. Well, she says, "I have Harry here, that's your father, Henry. And then we have your two brothers, John and Francis. We have no William," she says, So she calls her bosses over there. She says, "So-and-so, we have a man here, we don't have a card for him, William." So he says, "Oh, we'll make a card up for William." And I thought I was going to be a big national hero by doing something like that. I could have not reported and nobody knew I was alive. So anyway, 2 months later, I was in the Army and they sent me down to Camp Stewart, Georgia. The president was down there yesterday and they called it Fort Stewart. They changed it about 10 years ago. So I was in anti-aircraft. I was in the anti-aircraft for 14 months. In that time, we went to the West Coast for desert maneuvers. And they put us on big flat cars. We had sleeping accommodations on Pullman trains, but they took all of our equipment and tied it onto and across the country. So every state we went and stopped at, we used to jump out and go around. Oh, it was in Oklahoma, Guess, well, we wound up in Yuma, Arizona. That's way down the border of Mexico. So when we saw that, well, water, give us water. It was the barren places. You thought you were thirsty. But after you were there a couple of days, you weren't thirsty. So that was pretty good. It's a dry climate. If you were in Florida, probably you'd be perspiring all the time. But out there, you didn't perspire that much. So that was good. I remember one particular, we had a night maneuvers, and with blackouts at night, and you had to watch the truck in front of you, and they had these little blinkers, not blinkers even, I forget what they call them on the lights, but dust was flying around. And when they made a turn, you were supposed to make a turn. So all of a sudden they made a turn and we didn't see them, and we were driving for about 10 minutes and nothing. So we pulled over to the side. We had to stay there all night long because nobody could find us. Yeah, so the next day they come out with a Jeep, they're looking around and they find it. But that was it, we lost them with the dust. So after that, it was very good out there. And then after that, we went to Fort Bliss, Texas.
You were still in the anti-aircraft?
Anti-aircraft, yeah. We went to Fort Bliss, Texas. And at one time, Fort Bliss was used for the Mexican War and everything. It was a cavalry place. Horses, all horses, no tanks or anything like that. But I don't know why, I think they put us there until they got an idea what they were going to send us.
What was it like being a New York City boy in the deep South and out in the West?
Well, I loved it. I loved all the traveling. That was a big thrill because I could never afford to get out of New York.
You said the food was good too.
The food in the army was... We were very poor people in the Depression and so forth. And I was telling John when we got in the army the first day, down at Camp Stewart, we go for breakfast, and I said, there's a big tray of sausages, all of it. The Army had all the time, even when I was in combat, the Army, 4 or 5 times a week they would come up with the hot food. Maybe they'd miss 1 or 2 when you were doing some action, you know. But they treated us very good. And you still find guys complaining. You know, it really is... I would say, I wonder what they had in civilian life, you know. So in Fort Bliss, that was a very good setup. That was near El Paso, Texas. And a notice came down that the Army was looking for infantrymen. I know myself, I didn't like the anti-aircraft because we didn't do that much, but all they kept saying was, clean the gun, put it in Cosmoline or something. Every time the dust flew out there, it was like a desert too. So I said, well, this is a good way of getting out and see some action. You know, a young guy, 20 years old. So we went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. That was good, very exciting, and a lot of people were coming in. They were making a whole new division. I was a corporal in the gun crew. So when I got to Fort Jackson, they had no use for a corporal, they made you a sergeant, so I became a sergeant. And we were there maybe 3 or 4 months. And it's October, we were shipping out.
Would be October 43?
44.
44.
44.
Okay, so it's after...
That was after the D-Day, yeah. Yeah, D-Day we found it out one morning. We woke up and they said they invaded Europe, you know, so forth. It sounded exciting, but it turned out to be hell. So we went across on the Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, what was that like?
Yeah, and then we had 13,000, and we had 90 of us were in the library. It was a library. And the funny part about it, I lived around the Hudson River there in New York. I worked there all my life in that neighborhood. So I worked on 56th Street, and here was the ship on 50th Street. In fact, for years, or not for a couple of years, I used to go down the harbor and look at all the ships, these big Normandy. Even the Normandy got on fire. That was a crime. Well, anyway, the night before we were going to leave, we had to meet an officer on 43rd Street in Broadway. There was an Italian restaurant, Taffanetti's. So sure enough, we met him at 12 o'clock at night or something. And he says, I'm sorry to say, but you're not going home no more. You know, we're going to ship out. So sure enough, we get down on the ship. And they go so fast. They go like 35 miles an hour or something. And they don't need any convoy, thank God. And it's to feed a crew like that, you went down for breakfast, you know, you said, we're going to have to give you a hard-boiled egg, toast, an orange, and maybe coffee or milk. But nothing fancy, and you only ate twice a day. And we wound up over in Scotland, beautiful countryside and everything. And then they put us on some trains and we went down into England.
At that point, you were now in the 87th Division?
87. Yeah, when I left the anti-aircraft, we went to... And I'll tell you, after all the fighting we did, it was really hot, cold and whatnot. That anti-aircraft outfit wound up in Hawaii. Yeah, I kept some kind of touch with them, but they wound up in Hawaii. Oh, anyway, we were in England for about a month, and then we go down to the Channel, and we went across on a nice little steamer. And that was the place they only give you one bullet, and not on the Queen
Is
Elizabeth.
that right, one bullet?
Yeah, going into combat, we landed in Le Havre, so they gave each soldier one bullet.
You landed in Le Havre?
Yeah. And you know, too many people with guns. I know it happened to me one time. Have one in the chamber, you don't know it, like, you know. So anyway, we get to Le Havre, and that was all flattened out it was. So I says to John, talking about it, I said, when I saw that, I said, wow, that's good. They can make a new city. Instead of having small little roads, they can make boulevards and everything from scratch, you know.
It was all bombed out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Europe, it was bad for transportation, the big tractor trailers. They couldn't manipulate around the towns. I didn't see it, but sometimes they would just tear a house apart, right? So they could, you know, go there. So anyway, we get to Le Havre, and they put us on trucks and take us out to the, wound up in some apple orchards. So, all mud. We had our pup tents there.
What time of the year was this?
October, November.
Okay.
October, middle of October.
So you have so much mud on your feet, and the tent was behind you. You just plop back in and then take your shoes off, because otherwise your blankets never would. So we were there, and we said, oh, we can use some hay. So sure enough, we were only there two or 3 days. We started to get some hay from the farmer's barn, you know, and put that in. That was good. It was warm and a little dry. And the next day they said to us, the farmer told us that we took his hay, we stole his hay that he needed for his cattle and so forth like that. He says, we have to pay them. So we all had to go like a $50 a piece. I was telling John only recently, you have to go to war with some change in your pocket to pay your way. So we had to give him $20 or $50, whatever it came out to be. So then after that, a couple of days, they put us on trucks, and you really can't remember every little...
Were you in a rifle squad at that point?
I was a squad leader.
You were a squad leader.
The assistant platoon leader. The lieutenants were never there. They got wounded and whatnot. They didn't get wounded from being in the foxholes. You know, they were back in the barns or someplace with artillery or something. But it was, they always said that the war was won by the sergeants. Because there was a lot of sergeants, and they knew how to use their own noodle, you know. And the officers, nobody had experiences about war. Even the colonels, nobody knew anything about war. And nobody knew about frontline troops. They didn't know anything like that. You learn by experience. You know? And these people, we correspond with some of them now.
You went to Metz?
Oh yeah, well yeah, Metz.
So you're part of the Third Army.
Third Army. Yeah.
What was it like to be part of the Third Army?
Very proud. Yeah, very, very. I feel some of these other armies that were over there, I just can't remember the general's name. But they didn't get any coverage like Patton did. They did things, but I don't think they were in the area where the real action was like, you know. So we wound up in Metz, and that was a big fortification place. And you could add their tank guns and hit the walls and nothing. It was built 100 years ago, I know.
That was the baptism of fire.
That was your first time in combat?
Yeah,
Metz.
and it was no man-to-man or anything. It was just shooting at walls. And we were near Nancy, France, so. And then we're in the Saarbrücken, and then the word came that they were having trouble up in Belgium. The Germans were trying to break through. So we didn't know nothing. We were, all the time we were just our little squad, maybe another squad. We didn't know what was going on. I read about all these towns, and I never knew what towns they were. And most of the time we were on the outskirts of town, flushing out the woods and everything. And the colonels and everybody else, their CPs were in the town. So anyway, we had to go about 100 miles or so, or even say more than that. And we were on big flatbed trucks. And they put the sides on them, you know, the flatbed where they put the sandbags like or something. And then they put these wooden barriers all around. And that was it. It was all open, and it was snowing.
Middle of December.
Yeah. And up we went to around Belgium somewhere. And we had to relieve the 101st Infantry Airborne.
What was that like?
It was very little, like funny like. They were in white robes, like, I don't know if that helped anything. But we came up and they say, hey, so-and-so, you're going to be relieved here from the 87th to see you. And it was just, okay, have a nice trip, and I'll see you next Christmas, like, you know. And then you were in their holes, like, you know.
That was outside of Bastogne?
Bastogne, you know. So after a day or two, well, there was no Air Force, because there was so much fog, and they couldn't get the airplanes up, which would have been very good. Anyway, then we started to move out. Then you could see the guys hanging out of tanks, wherever they were, the Germans must have massacred, you know, they were trying to win the war. And that's why they say that Malmedy, and people say, what the Germans did, what were they supposed to do? Capture prisoners? They were trying to go and go and go. Yeah, we didn't like to capture prisoners ourselves either. Because what are you going to do with them? Put them in your pocket or something? We used to just send them down the road. You know, we knew people were behind them. And in a lot of those cases, the Germans wanted to get captured. They thought they could go to England. In fact, before we left the States, in some of the camps we were in, there was German prisoners there already. So they had a great time. You know, they fought the war, and they were eating the same food we were.
Were you dressed for the weather?
No. I can't believe the Desert Storm. These guys were going to war, and they were taking a 747. Yeah, they had the big transport plane flying these guys over the ocean, and they're all dressed with these beautiful uniforms. We had galoshes. Well, they weren't prepared, the government. They didn't think they'd have a war or something. So we had galoshes, we had, you know, just regular dress pants and 2 pairs on, like something. But the galoshes, they had combat boots, the kind you strap over there. But found out right away that froze, and your feet was in there. That's how the trench foot. There were lots of that trench foot. And with the galoshes, you could move your feet around. And if you stuffed them with, well, you had socks on your feet, and if you could stuff straw in there, that was even better. Like, you know, at times, sometimes your feet sweat. But we used to have like at least 3 pairs of socks. And the routine was you took it off your feet and you put them in your helmet liner. And then from your helmet liner, you put it down around your stomach, the heat. And then from there back to your feet. You might have had another pair, you know, but that was the routine. That's why we had some pictures. You see guys with their socks hanging out of their belt. And some guys, you know, after reading the war, after the war, some guys actually did it on purpose. You know, to go back to have their feet treated. And some of them really had it bad. They just cut off their toes. Some of them even had feet that used to turn black and everything, the blood, no circulation. We lost a lot of people, as many, I think, instead of getting shot, you know. In fact, there was a couple of cases, as Tom and John, the guys shooting themselves. And, you know, they looking for that $1 million wound, like, you know, if you get it in a war, fine, but some guys would just shoot. I know one guy, he was in our platoon, and they said, oh, he did a lousy job, you know, he splintered his bone and everything like that. And they knew, they took those guys right out. And,
Is that when you came across the 106, the guys you went overseas with, around that time?
yeah, on the 106th Infantry Division, they went across with us on the Queen Elizabeth. Well, sometimes it took 3 ships back and forth, and it wasn't always the Queen Elizabeth, but the different regiments and battalions would go, and then guys with their artillery would go on another ship and so on. So 106 was with us, and they put them as a new outfit. They spread them out in the Ardennes. And they had them spread out like maybe for 12 miles. Because they didn't think the Germans, you know. And that could have been us. They got captured, a lot of them did, and I think one regiment got away because they were on the outskirts of the Bulge. But nobody ever knew. We got there, we saw the name. We used to say Bastagny or something, you know. We thought, what town is that? But the weather started to clear up or something, and then they started to get supplies in, and they started to get more reinforcements and everything. And then we started to, you know, pound the hell out of the Germans. They were tough. They were real good, but at the end, they wanted us to quit. You know, all the glory, the years they had, they could see that was the end of it. But we were in the foxholes. And you couldn't dig. If you only stayed there like 2 days or 3 days, and every day that you stayed there, you dug it a little bit deeper, trying to make it a little more comfortable. You know? So what you do is throw pine needles and leaves and so forth in the hole to keep your feet off the mud or whatever was in there. And then you'd get the branches from the trees. You know, the fatter ones are better. And we put them over, well, when you dug I think Con Edison does it now, when they dig, they throw the dirt on the side, like that. Then we could put the wood across it, and put the pine needles, the branches up. Then after you did that pretty good, then you threw some mud on top of it. Right? It helped you a bit, you know, it kept the weather off you. And then you'd have 2 guys in a foxhole. And it was a joke, like, you know, 2 guys, you're supposed to stay awake for a couple hours and the other guy would sleep. But it was never like that. It was always, hey, Willie, are you awake there? Yeah, you know, they didn't call me Willie, but Bill or Sarge or something. But you always thought the other guy was gonna fall asleep, like, you know. And about 4 times like that, at night, you couldn't get out of your hole. And it, you know, it really, if you had to take a crap, you just did it somehow, but you couldn't walk around. Sometimes the Germans didn't even know we were there, and the patrol would walk in on us. And we had like a wagon train for the cowboys and Indians. The holes just had it around. And they walked right in, and they're right in the middle of us, and then somebody would spot them and halt, and shooting all over the place. Like, but you didn't, they were the only ones running around was the German. And that would last maybe 5 minutes. That's the end of it. And you'd stay like that all night long. Nobody would get up and walk around and see what's what. You know? And the next day, besides rigor mortis, they were frozen, whatever position they were in. And you never got to the point where it frightened you or something. And that part about getting replacements, we used to get a lot of replacements. And before you even really knew their names or what, they had to go back injured or they got killed. You know.
So how were the replacements treated?
Very good. You know, I think the movies make things, you know, they said you didn't get to be friendly with them. Well, they make stories that you didn't want to get friendly with them because they might get killed and make you sad, like, you know. But you didn't know their names. Let me jump to, it was about 2 years ago. I got a couple of letters from these guys, young sons. Their fathers were in the service, and they were in my outfit, 345th Company F. And my father never talked about the war. You know? Do you know my father? And they'd give me the names, and you never knew them. You would know about 10 guys that came overseas with you, you know. But anybody else, it's like, hi, Joe or something, or maybe, hey, Burns. But you never got friendly with them or what. And they got injured and they're gone. Most of the time, they never come back, like, you know. So, would you write to me and let me know or something? So I couldn't write that much anyway. That was another thing about the war. Most people didn't have any education. And they didn't know how to write. You know, they could maybe put their name, but they didn't know how to write. Nobody knew how to write before the war. They never wrote a letter, but when you got in the army, you know, to get a letter, you had to write a letter, you know. But I don't think the army took that into consideration. They weren't stupid, it's just that they never had an education. So what was I, oh. So I said, I'll call this fella up, the son. And I'm thinking to myself, it's the soldier's son. But he was a man, like 40 years old. One guy is a professor at Cobble. And I thought I was going to speak to a young son. See, his father had died in 1980 or something. I called him. Oh, he says, Mr. Bramswig. Oh, I didn't think you'd call. Like, I thought, you know, you wrote a letter or something. And he says, did you know my father? And I said, no. I said, well, you know, it was hard to get to know anybody. They come and go. I says, and you're moving. So anyway, oh, it's so nice he's a call, he says. He said, my father was a forward observer, and that the other guy, his father got wounded, and he was laying out in the field for a couple of hours or something.
Yeah, he almost frozen.
And when he did get rescued, they told him it was good he was out in the field with the snow, because the cold weather made him clean, the wound healed it up a little bit, like, you know. So I says, I don't know how I get this anyway, but I was reading his mind, like, can you tell me something about my father, like? So I says to him, I want you to know, there's more to this. I said, your father, I says, laying out in that field, I said, the conditions and everything, and besides that, I says, he was wounded. I says, he was a hero. Well, the guy wrote to me and everything, he says, I told my mother what you said about my father, that he was a hero. And this guy was like a professor or something, and he was wanting to write a story about his father. He was born in the South and this and that, so he wanted to know every little detail. And he sent me a copy of it. It was about 10 pages. He says, I wanted you to know something for being so nice. And in the article, he says, he doesn't mention my name, but he says, one of the soldiers from my father's outfit called me. And he says, he said, and the way he said it, me, he wanted me to know that my father was a hero. He says, even myself now, he said, I couldn't speak, he says. He said, that meant so much to me to know. It was really good. And we had a couple like that.
And he was actually in your company too, the guy.
Huh?
He was in your company, your father was.
Yeah, but I didn't know him. Then we got in touch with a lieutenant that was censoring my letters. His name was Prater, and his name was on the list or something. So this Lieutenant Prater had scratch notes, and he had squad leaders, squads, and here was, in one of them, Prater, and then he had Sergeant Bramswig. Yeah, this is a piece of paper.
It was a list of his squads for that day during the Bulge. He said he picked it up in some French hotel and wrote on it.
Yeah, a scratched piece of paper.
And a couple of his buddies, Borza,
Yeah.
a couple of guys rider.
So we do a lot of correspondence now. John enjoys it. I don't hate with communicating, you know. But there is so many guys that are still. I didn't do nothing for. That was 1943. I didn't do nothing until 2 or 3 years ago. I didn't get in touch with anybody. I never had to go to the hospital or ask the Army for anything, you know. Lucky. In fact, all the guys that got killed, they got wounded, they got captured, they got their feet cut off. They did so much, and I didn't get anything. And there must have been a lot of other guys too, you know, that the stuff was here and there, and you weren't there. It was
Like one guy was hit right next to you?
oh yeah, that happened a few times. I always tell them it's like being a deer. I can feel how a deer is, but a deer is not knowing what's going on. We used to have to walk down roads at night, maybe by yourself even. One time I had to take a prisoner, and what the hell am I doing here, you know? Somebody could snipe at me, and the prisoner could escape, but most of the time the prisoners didn't want to. But a lot of people got killed like that, just from one shot. So walking down the road, but we had one, we were in this town, and we were on a hill. And we looked down, and there was a German soldier about 2 or 3 blocks away. It must have been a couple hundred yards. So I says, maybe we could hit that guy, I said. So 2 of us knelt down, it was a 2-story house. 2 of us knelt down with our rifles, and 2 of them was over our shoulders with their rifles. So it was 4 rifles. I said, now when I count to 3, we'll shoot. And this guy was walking on the other side of a little stream, like a roadway. And we said, 1, 2, 3, we shot. Now in the States, I couldn't hit anything on the rifle range. This guy was walking and he didn't fall down, he was hit. And I think that surprised the hell out of us. He must have been dead because he didn't move or anything like that. But it was surprised that we hit him from that distance, but it was the 2-gun, 4-gun.
So you're you come up to support the Bulge. How long did it take to clear out?
Well, I was only in combat 4 months.
Okay.
I got 3 battle stars. It was 150 days. I told John, every day they get reports, the 2nd platoon, 2nd squad or something, 2 men wounded or killed or something. Well, we have to get replacements for them as soon as we can. It might take a week. But Sergeant Bramswig was there. Sergeant Bramswig was there. Nobody said anything about taking Sergeant Bramswig and sending him to Paris or do anything. You weren't a guinea pig, but they were happy that you didn't get killed. Because other guys that I knew that I went over with, one guy got wounded 3 times with Sergeant Wild. I correspond with him now. John called him up a couple of months ago. He's in Florida. And tell the story?
Yeah,
His wife
picked up the phone and I was trying to explain my name's Bramswig and she mentions across the room and I could hear him just jump up because they haven't talked to him since the war. And he picked up the phone and he said, "Bramswig, you son of a gun!" And I just had to tell him I was the son and I eventually got him in touch with him, but they were overseas.
Yeah. Right, Bramswig.
Yeah.
Sure, you never expect that kind of stuff. Well, he got wounded 3 times, but they weren't enough to keep you out for 2 weeks or something. And he got a Silver Star. But the thing was, a lot of those guys were living in the hospitals, maybe for arms or this and that, getting 3 meals a day and a good night's sleep. But guys like myself and a lot of them were in the holes every night. I mean, we did go into...
Excuse me, just
Yeah.
we're going to put another tape in. Very good. Now, the first town taken by the 354th was Mendelsheim at the German border?
the 345. What do you think?
345th. 345th. Can you tell us about that?
I never knew the names. I knew Metz and Koblenz and all these little small towns that maybe had 500 people, 1,000 people in them. Most of the time we didn't stay there that we could look at signs. We were always on the outside. And what would happen, the battalions and different companies would come in with their jeeps and trucks and cooks. And the first thing they would say, get the troops out on the high ground area. You know, to protect the high ground. So nobody would sneak up on them. And you could never make a fire. In fact, even didn't smoke at the time. If you wanted to smoke, you had to get down in your hole or something like that. And even they used to say, we didn't do it that much, but shooting tracer bullets. If you want to say to somebody where you thought the enemy was or something, you'd say, watch my tracer light. And you'd shoot them. But at the same time, they found out where you were shooting from, so you didn't do that much, but those things were done.
Now, did you know what German units you were up against?
No.
Principally infantry units?
Oh yeah, yeah. We never. Oh, we had a couple of instances with German tanks, maybe in Schoenberg or something. And it was like the town was down, and then there was hills. It was all hills and Christmas trees, I call them, the pine tree. And here comes this German tank down the dirt road over there. I don't know, half a mile away, I don't know what it was. Wow, he says, you know, he doesn't know that we're here. He says, get a tank destroyer, he said, you know. And they're not too far away. They're never in front of the infantry. They're always at the back of the infantry. And sure enough, the tank destroyer comes on. He said, look at them, you know, start blasting. They shot about 9 times and they missed. You could see that the roads were in concrete, and it just, and you could see, you know, come on, get him. And the Germans, oh my God, you know, they're shooting at it. And he was coming down the hill, and there was a road, and he cut into the woods. He said, he got away. But, they told us that, well, he was out of our range and stuff like that. I guess nowadays with the rockets we have, they would have got him with the first shot, like, you know.
Who was the first guy, one of the guys hit, was that Mickey Mantle guy you said was the calisthenics?
Oh, yeah, the first time we got overseas, you know, you see Joe Louis or somebody like that, you say, wow, he'll never get killed, that guy. He got killed the first one, a physical educated guy. The little skinny guy like Audie Murphy or somebody, you know him. I don't know however he got all those medals, because I don't know how he was in those spots all the time, you know, to get a medal. You know, it's, there wasn't that many situations where you could stick out as one person. The thing that, they come out one day and they said, we're not using enough ammunition. And it was true. In the States, they were more or less telling you to conserve. You know, don't be wasting. But as we found out later on, the more you shot, the Germans kept going away and whatnot, because they didn't, at the end, they didn't have the stuff to come back with. So that was it. You have to shoot more ammunition, so the colonel, our colonel, can tell the division, General Collins, and he could tell the Third Army that the 87th F Company is using ammunition, boy, they're good. Then they said, later on, a couple of days, we're not giving out enough medals. We're going to give out medals? I always thought they come from Washington or something. What? We're not giving out, we're going to give out medals? And that's the way it was. You had to tell the colonels and those people with a story. That Bill Bramswig, he went out there with that tank loaded and this and that. He drew fire, but it was, and you got a Silver Star or something. We had, even the officers, well, most of them were never around because they were wounded or something. And we used to have to make up stories. Oh yeah, you crawled out there and the bullets were flying around. Not using enough ammunition, and you have to make up stories. That's just what it was, make up stories for the medals. So the division or the battalion can have it. I only told John a short while, that Japanese outfit, there was a Japanese regiment. Now, when they were interned in California there, when the war started, and they put the civilians there, now they had to do that. I remember that. You know, I was 20 years old at the time. They didn't mistreat them or anything like that, but you couldn't trust them, you know, because they were so with their hometown or their own country where they were born. That's where their allegiance was. It wasn't with the American flag. So we didn't put them in a concentration camp. They got 3 meals a day, a nice place to sleep, and so forth. Well, anyway, when they made an outfit and they sent them over, what do you think they did when they said we're not giving out enough medals? They said, we're going to have the best outfit in the world here. And they gave away 50 Silver Stars and 200 Bronze Stars and 2 congressional medals. And that's how they got all those medals, because they were writing them up as much as they wanted to. And to cheer them up and make them feel, I mean, I'm sure a lot of them were brave soldiers, you know, but
Now you had the one time in the house where the BAR went off, one of your own guys?
yeah, we're in one of the towns, and we were downstairs with the lieutenant, the sergeants, the squad leaders, and a lot of the troops were sleeping on the floors and everything upstairs. So one guy comes down, and he was the BAR man, and he says, I'm having trouble with the BAR. So we're all on the floor, a couple of chairs and things. And he says, when I pull the bolt back, he says, I guess he used to jam. And sure enough, he had one in the chamber. And thing went, shook the hell out of us, you know. It went right through the ceiling, and before we knew it, they were flying down the stairs. Guy got shot dead upstairs. You know, one of our, so the guy who did it with the BAR, they had to take him out anyway. Bad enough, you know, we're killing Germans, and here we're killing our own people. So it was, I know that happened to me in the States. We were on guard duty, guarding an ammunition depot. It was just like a formality, but you had a clip of bullets. And they'd take you by truck out to the ammunition depot, you know, it could blow up. And you walked around, so you had maybe a squad, 12 guys there, and after a couple hours they would take you back, and then a truck would come with another 12 guys. And you go back to the barracks where they were keeping you, and you put your rifle in the rifle rack. About 20 minutes later, a messenger or somebody comes in, and they said, there's one of the guys up in the mine in the ammunition depot. He says he's missing a bullet. When you put a clip in, it's 8 bullets, like, you know, all like that. And they go in, and one goes into the chamber, like. And when you're finished, we pulled it, I didn't know that much technique. You'd pull the bolt back, and then the clip would come out. But that one stayed in the chamber. I put that in the rack. I didn't notice. And then 4 hours later, whenever they're going on duty again, so I said, everybody had the bullets in here. Take the bullet out, and, you know, get rid of it. I never told anybody. But it can happen too. That story about don't let anybody point a gun at you, it's not loaded. It can be loaded. And I'm sorry, you know. Yeah.
As a combat infantryman, what was your most concern about the Germans?
Well, I wouldn't have wanted to fight them at the beginning, because they were real trained and pride. And that's a thing. I had all that pride. You could play the Star Spangled Banner, and I knew all about don't shoot until you see the white of their eyes. We have not yet begun to fight. And a lot of people don't have that. Now it would be worse, because there's too many nationalities, and their allegiance goes to their nationalities, whatever it is, like, you know. They're American now, but at that time, there wasn't too many different nationalities. So, what was that part?
So the Germans were strong.
Yeah, the Germans were real regiment. Well, that was one fault they had. They would do anything that they were told, like. But if the officer got killed or did something went along, what are we going to do? Whereas a sergeant, and it's true, they said the sergeants won the war for us. Because a sergeant, you know, I'm just talking to regular people, they would just take over the situation. And they said, yeah, take the lieutenant back or something like that. And then you get in there, and things would keep going on. Like. But they said the Germans didn't do those things. Like.
What did you think of the German equipment?
Well, you know, people always talked about the 88, you know, the German 88 was the best cannon for accuracy and so forth. And their tanks, see, they were preparing for this. And their tanks really had good armor on it, like, you know. Whereas ours was like tin cans or something, and the cannons were in that. I remember the 50 caliber machine guns from the anti-aircraft. You know, that's some bullet, that is. And they said it can go in through a tree, like, you know. It's a powerful. Well, we had 450s on the half track. They had them in the infantry somewhere. and you would look down through the barrel with a glass thing, and you could see through the barrel. And there would be a tree or a flagpole. And you'd get this one gun and twist it and lock it on. It's on right on the top of that flagpole. And you do it with the 4 guns. And if you fired that thing, I guess I never fired it with like that, but those 4 hit that spot with those 50 caliber bullets. That was a powerful enemy. That would scare the Germans. They knew that 50 caliber was a tough enemy to try to fight.
Was the 88 like that? 4? The 88, was that 4?
No, that was a cannon.
What'd you think of the German machine gun? Compared
They had
to,
those grape guns and stuff like that. No, we never, not me personally, never got, overpowering somebody with that. Well, there was time when I threw hand grenades, which was, you know how the roofs of houses would go? Everything was barns, a house and a barn. And you'd go down and maybe there's nobody there. You never saw the civilian population. I don't know where they went. I mean, sometimes you would in the small farms, but when you would come down the side of this house or the barn and hear it, and me, I'm gonna do all these things, and we had these hand grenades. And you pull it. You know, people think you throw it like a baseball, but you couldn't. The thing, you'd be throwing your elbow out. You had to push them. So I pushed it, and I was standing next to him. And do you know that thing went over the top like that much? And it was like this, the roof. It just as well could have come right down into my lap or some of our soldiers. So you didn't do that too much, because that was without thinking, you just thought you could throw it over and it would go over. Boy, it just went over us. And then a barn has that big opening in it to let the gas out like or something from the animals. The farm cuts out these. So I'm just as times at myself, so I was going on and there was this barn, it might have been the same one. I saw throw a grenade in there in case anybody is in there. So I stepped back, and the opening was pretty big, they took the bricks out. And I stepped back, and I threw it, and as soon as I left, I said to myself, fast, supposing it hits the thing and falls on the floor, doesn't go in. I should have been next to the hole, here I am, you think I'm bowling or something. And that was a scary thing, that I'm sure people got killed by doing stupid things without thinking. And then we got into the Siegfried line, and I think where we were anyway, I think we went in the morning. We were, at night we were working our way there. And any of those forts, they protect them from the outside all the time. They don't want somebody to come up and put a big demolition in them. So, but those forts we slept in one night, and there was a big cement wall. You walked in, then it stopped, and you had to go this way. And then another one to get inside, so you couldn't shoot in there. They were really built because they were building them for 20 years. Another time we were on patrol that night, and we'd come down to the barn, and everything was barns. And this is like 2 o'clock in the morning or something. And you could hear them moving around because the Germans have those boots, I think they were made out of wood, or they put nails in them so they wouldn't wear around.
hobnail boots.
Yeah. So you could hear some shuffling going on. we didn't know what to do. Like I said, you know, should we go back? And it turns out to be there were cows. But our imagination scared the Germans. But it was the cows, you know, how they moved their feet around.
Sure. What about you? You found that one covered area that the Germans had built, and you guys all went in the hole?
Yeah, see, we were always in German territory at the end. So they had a lot of time to build foxholes, but they didn't build foxholes. They had this one hole in the ground, like this room. And it must have been dug down like 5 feet. And then they put like an umbrella over it. It didn't have any, the only purpose it was there was to keep the snow from going in the hole. And the place could hold maybe 20 guys. So we found that, oh, this is good, like, this is where we're going. Anytime you could sleep indoors, it was Christmas. So we're in there, and this one guy was Sergeant Ryder, he was my assistant at the time. And he could stand, and there was an opening, like, and he could, you know, look around. So I thought, you know, you should stand there and listen, like, you know. And we were in there, it was fairly comfortable and everything. And all of a sudden, he was a Sergeant Ryder, he goes, halt, halt. And the next word out of his mouth, my gun is jammed, he says. Oh, is it? Yeah, okay. I said, here, throw a grenade. I handed it up to him, and he threw the grenade. And we said, let's get out of here. Because all the German had to do was throw a grenade down there, and we were all confined, you know, our eardrums would have fallen. So we all get out, and a couple of them, he says, ran down there. One guy was laying there on the dirt road. So, you know, that was another thing, you're a sergeant, you know, you couldn't say, hey, you go to see if he's alive, you know. So I went out to see if he was alive. I wish I was a private at the time. So I go out there, I get my rifle and I hit him. He moves, I thought he was dead. He moved, I jumped back, you know. So anyway, we made a prisoner out of him, but your mind is gone. And then I had to take him during the night, I don't know why, down 5 or 6 blocks in the woods. You didn't know how to get rid of the prisoners. That Malmedy, read it, Malmedy?
Malmedy.
We had the same thing ourselves. We were going to go into a town, and this happened, must happen lots of times. We were going to go into a town in the afternoon, you know, about 4 o'clock, good. And they used to use bazookas, those things.
Mortars?
Those bazookas with the big knob on them.
Panzerfausts.
Yeah. So then they made some shooting, you know. So that was the end of that. We couldn't go into those houses that night. So we were mad. We had to start digging little trenches, but a lot of times you didn't. We had a lieutenant, and I guess his messenger, but together, they dug a foxhole. We just grabbed a little indentation in the ground, like, you know, what's going to happen. First thing that happened, they threw these bazookas around. The lieutenant and this other guy got killed. They just punctured a concussion. Then they started to do some shooting. And then 2 or 3 at a time they come out surrendering. In the meantime, they killed a few tankers. That was back 100 yards or whatever. They took them back there and they killed them. They killed 23 of them. In fact, I went back maybe 15 minutes later. A writer I sent, he was a Jewish fellow, and we sent him. He says, can I go back and look? That's all they was going. I said, don't do anything. You can just look. I said, because you have these things on your mind your whole life. One guy, German, ran to get away. They had to chase him, to kill him. Otherwise, he would have went up ahead. It was 23. As I found out a couple of days later, they just threw them into 2.5-ton trucks. And then when our general heard about it, never happened, he says. That was it. One guy, a month or two ago, was it wireless on the
Yeah.
He says, yeah, so-and-so says, you were responsible for that. Really? Yes. And I started to tell him the whole story, how it happened. I don't know. Again, one guy, when I sent him back, Ryder, he must have said, oh, Bramswig's in charge of it.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with that at all, I says, you know.
Where did you cross the Rhine? Do you remember?
Beauport.
What was that like?
We went across at night. That was the bridge that they captured, whole, the one bridge that didn't blow up.
The Remagen Bridge.
Yeah. That was only a couple of miles upstream. They told us we were going to cross the road. We crossed the Moselle too. They said we're going to cross at night. We're going to send a scouting party over. You can't all go at once. You don't know if they have machine guns waiting for you. So we're going to go over at night and try not to make any noise banging the boat. You know, this happened. A week later we went across. We went across small motorboats. You know, would hold 8 guys. Like, in fact, we had a tape on that. So the thing was we had to get on the other side first, fast. Sometimes if you went slow, they'd be taking pop shots. But this was at night time. So we got in there, and it was a place like it was on the outskirts, because I've seen movies of the steamships going on vacation and everything. And it's a big Coney Island down below, but we were up in Yonkers some places. But we had no problem. We got over there, and first thing you do is you go through some houses, no Germans are there or anything. And then the next day, the rest of them came over. The same way with D-Day. I don't know how many thousands of guys were in D-Day. What they did, when they came over a week later, they were in D-Day. You know what I mean? The original bunch that went over, I think a couple of thousand got killed, you know. But after that, it all quieted down.
D-Day plus
people, yeah.
Right.
You know, so yeah, I was in D-Day. You know. D-Day would be the first 12 hours or something. You wouldn't want to be there.
Didn't O'Leary tell you to take the point? Somewhere in the Rhine or?
Oh yeah, this sergeant, very nice guy. In fact, we used to be together all the time. And he'd become our platoon leader, and he was only a private when he went over. Then he became a squad, the staff sergeant. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, he says to me, "Hey, Bramswig," he says, "why don't you take the lead sometime?" He says, you know. I knew what it was. I said, you don't want to be a scouts out. 2 more scouts out. I said, well, I understand that they're going to make you lieutenant for the platoon. He says, yeah, that's your job. That was all it was doing. We still were good friends or something. But
You told him to take the point.
yeah, you take it.
But you think he eventually sent you home, maybe?
Cool.
You think he sent you home, maybe, at the end?
Yeah, when the president died, Roosevelt, that's the only one I knew. That morning they came up with the lunch, breakfast, and whoever was in charge of it said, "Hey, Bramswig, they want you to go back to the, what was it, that battalion, not the battalion, what was it?
Cooks?
Yeah, the company CP. They're going to send you home." You talk about winning the lottery here? That was really something. If you knew about it a week or 2 ahead, something you could think about. you're going back with the kitchen, you're going home. I went back with the kitchen, and they had tents and everything where they were cooking and everything. So I knew them, just see them around all the time. I said, oh, you're going home, but don't write any letters home. He said, you get killed over here too, like, you know. But that was unbelievable. So I was the third one that they picked to go home. Every month they picked about 50 guys out of the
You had the points to go?
head of the division. No, I was only overseas for 6 months. I was in combat 4 months. My brother was in Iran for 3.5 years or something. Well, we got the...
Well, they had like a lottery or something.
So the first guy, he was a small, older guy. You know, when you're 20 years old, a guy that's 32 is an old man, right? Well, anyway, they needed somebody to go down to see if this little wooden bridge going across the stream was okay or was any problem, you know. Anybody want to go? He says, I'll go. So they let him go. A week later, they put him into Silver Star Line. You know, it was a dangerous assignment. Nobody wanted to do it. They found out it was okay. And then a month or so later, another guy was going home. No, but what we do, we take a collection. Now this first guy that got that Silver Star, I gave him $150. There's no place to spend money or anything, you know. He wound up with $500 and something. Well, he was supposed to come back. He was supposed to be 45 days, was it? 45 days, not 30 days, 45 days. Then you're supposed to come back to the outfit. A month later, another guy was going, I don't know, I gave him 50 or something. And he wound up with $300 or $400 off of it. Then when it came my turn, it wasn't my turn because a lot of people wanted to go. I wound up like with $200, you know, maybe a little more. And a couple of guys gave me their Lugers, the German Luger. And they said, you know, see if you get it home, and we'll get in touch with you at home. Well, I didn't want to get too monkey around with them, you know. You can't go home for trying to smuggle a gun. I sold both of them for $100 a piece. So that went with my $200 that I had in cash. And sure enough, when I got home, 6 months, 5 months later, I got letters in the mail. They were looking, what happened with the guns? Like, you know, I didn't even answer them. One guy was from Wisconsin.
Yeah, I spoke to O'Leary's wife a few months ago, and she said he had furlough power as the new platoon leader and threw his name in a hat because they were buddies. And he picked it out and lucky enough to go home.
Yeah, he called a lot of them, and he died a couple of months ago. He had cancer.
So what did you think in general of your experience?
It's fantastic. Unbelievable. And like I say, you know, I try to write it a little bit. And I said, the people that saw Private Rhine, which was nice and everything, I said, but the guys who were actually there, and I put it down, that they have an Academy Award in there. See, Private Rhine and all that, they add a lot of baloney to it. Like, you know, it doesn't really happen that much. Bullets and everything's exploding around. If a thing like that happened, it only happened 5 times, like, not with me, but in the whole. I always thought the guys in Vietnam had a rougher time, you know, especially with the weather, and fanatics maybe, or even the Japanese.
What'd you do when you got back?
I took about 10 days off, and then I went back to work.
You resumed your
Oh,
old job?
no, when we come back, it was in May. And I got put on a hospital ship to Washington or something, because there was some room. And that was a big ship, but it was in a convoy. And you could see these small ships. When they go like that, their propellers would come out of the water, those Liberty ships. My brother, when he went to Iran, it took him 40 days or something. He had to go down to South America and across the Atlantic. So when you're on a big luxury ship like the Queen Elizabeth, I mean, I've gone on vacation cruises on the Harlem American line a lot of times. It's a pleasure.
So you came back and you went back to work, basically.
Yeah, I come back 45 days, at home. Then I had to go back to Fort Benning, but I went to a couple of Camp Rucker or something. Then I wound up back in Fort Benning, because that was an infantry school. And we used to run problems like you run down this path and there'd be explosions and so forth. And then you had the OCS, Officers Training School. And Eisenhower's son was there even. And we used to say, you run through these problems, and that's what it was. You say, and the funny thing that they told us, now when you're in war, and your best friend gets shot and he's wounded, don't 4 guys pick him up and say, we'll take you back. Everybody wants to go back. So leave him there. There's somebody will come along and take him. And that's one thing, you did it instantaneously. When somebody gets shot next to you or wounded, you didn't go to try to put anyone, because you'd get killed too. You had to go and secure the area in front of you. And then when you did that, then you just go. And I never knew who those details were to pick up bodies and so forth, And a lot of times it wasn't just GIs. I remember reading about Eisenhower. He was speaking to the Russian generals, and the Russians were hard on prisoners. And the Germans knew that. And the German general says to Eisenhower, Eisenhower said, oh yeah, we give them this food and that food. You give them the food that you eat and everything? We wouldn't give them nothing, we were harsh and so forth. So Eisenhower said, he said, why do you do that, the Russians? So Eisenhower said, well, we feel when we give them the food that we eat, or pretty close to it, like that, they'll appreciate that. And that somehow or another that will get back to the people feeding our troops. And it was true. I mean, that wasn't the reason, but they respected the American soldier more than the Russians, well, they should have, because they killed all the Russian people, I think 15 million people or something, civilians and everything. It was very harsh. If he would have stopped going, Hitler, when they got to Belgium or something like that, and says, we're willing to have peace, but everything stays as it is. We would have made some kind of a treaty with him, and he could have kept Czechoslovakia and some of these, but he wanted everything. Do you know Russia has 11 time zones? We have 4 here. They have 11. I'll give a geography, a history of it. But they have languages that they can't even speak in. They have languages that they never put those people in the army. And they're deserted. In I think 1911 or sometime, they had this big explosion. I don't know what it was. They couldn't get there to find out what it was. And when they got there, like 40 years later, I think in World War II, the trees and everything were all knocked over. I don't know, I think
it was a meteorite, I think.
A big meteorite came. Yeah. But Russia is so vast. They speak Chinese, all kinds of languages. And they have all kinds of oil. But they don't have they have a railroad. But they don't have them going here and there. And they can't get to these big forests that they...
So Hitler thought he could cover all of that.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts?
No, but I think we're not patriotic enough. Soldiers are going into the army livelihood or something. I would have stayed in the Army if I didn't have a mother and father. I wasn't married, didn't have any girlfriends, that kind of stuff. So I would have stayed in the Army because it was really good. They treated you good, the living conditions. But it needs a war to get them. Now they're talking about spending money on the people in service, which they should. All right, it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Very good. Run out, go to the bathroom, be right back.
Yes. Your dad, you know what they are. You can just hold them up. He'll zoom into them. That's.
Okay, let me get a close-up of this.
Yeah, well, this is New York City, and different communities would put up banners and, what do you call these?
That's in Harlem.
Yeah, the neighborhood banners they would put up, and they would collect a lot of money because this stuff costs a lot of money to have made. And this one was in Harlem on 27th Street between Park and Lexington Avenue.
Okay.
The Metro North goes right by, but it's not there no more.
That's his platoon.
Yeah, this is the platoon. This was taken in the States.
Now, whereabouts are you?
I'm not there.
He took the photo.
Oh, okay.
This one guy has 2 rifles. And one of them has to be mine because I took the picture.
Ah, I see. Okay.
But here's a picture I had after I come home and so forth. Now all these guys, this was my Leary. He was the guy that they were going to make an officer out of. Yeah, a lot of guys got killed and wounded. And this is that Sergeant Weil, he got 3 Purple Hearts. Very good guys, very good. Well, they had bad stories about this fellow right here. It was Sergeant Leach. He was busted to private. He was regular Army. Yeah, this one guy here, he was a regular Army.
Okay, we got 30 seconds,
Okay.
so...
Well, he didn't want to take orders, and he told the lieutenant one time, "Don't you tell me what to do, you little..." And he pointed his gun at the officer. So,
Did you have another picture?
go ahead.
Okay, let me zoom on this really quick. And that's you.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, good.